I do remember I was crying, sitting on the floor because I did not want to leave that heaven. Well, when I told her I will move back, she's like, you cannot bring the German attitude back to Vietnam. I did not know I was Vietnamese or Asian until I looked into the mirror, because I only saw my friends and I see my reflection in them, and I only realized certain differences or, let's say, racism later on in my life.
So you've been back a month. What do you think then? Welcome to a Vietnam podcast with me, your host, Neil Mackay. I've been hosting this podcast since 2019. I came to Vietnam in 2015 for a holiday, came back in 2016, and I never left. I started this podcast to share stories of people connected to Vietnam. We're now over 300 episodes and we've hit over 100,000 downloads. So thank you so much to you for listening or watching. We're on YouTube now. I've turned over to the dark side and you can now watch these podcasts on YouTube. And I'm just really excited to talk to people about Vietnam. And I think I've learned most of my knowledge about Vietnam through this podcast. Now, my guest today, I met recently at a networking event, the Overseas Vietnamese networking event by Annie Vo, who's the sponsor of this season. Thank you very much, Premier Dental. And I was the token white guy, I think, at that. Annie invited me and I was like, this is for Overseas Vietnamese. I'm not one of those people. But she's like, no, come along. And I was like, okay, I'll come. And it was great. It was really amazing. Annie does incredible with her networking events and the lunch was good. And I got to meet someone like yourself. So my guest today was born in Saigon, but raised in Berlin. And that's we've talked about this in the past. There's quite a lot of Vietnamese people move to Germany. So we'll delve into that as well. She's lived in 4 different countries and is a trained plant scientist, which we've had many scientists on a Vietnam podcast before, but I don't think we've ever had a plant scientist. So I'm very excited to talk today about all things plants. Germany, Vietnamese, also has an American husband, which is a theme of this season because we've just talked to Hoa Chan. And her husband is American, my wife is American, so we're going to be talking about that and what it's like moving back to Vietnam. So my guest today is An Pham. Thank you very much for joining me on a Vietnam podcast.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Neil. Lovely to talk to you again.
You are very welcome. It's nice to see you again as well. So tell me how you ended up in Berlin.
My dad received a fund from the DAAD at the time, so the German Academy for Scientific Research, to go to Berlin and study philosophy and social science. Based on the situation at the time, the Berlin Wall, as you know, fell. He had to repeat his PhD and thought, I don't want to be far away from my wife and my child, and invited my mom and me over to Berlin. And that's how I came to Berlin in 1990 for the first time, and then officially moved there in 92.
So how old were you when you moved to Berlin?
I was 8.
So you remember then being in Saigon. What was it like growing up in Saigon as a young child?
It's so different than now. I have a vague memory of Saigon at the time. We used to live in District 10, I believe, in a community home.
It's pretty much the countryside, District 10 back then, would it have been?
Yes, it's lovely. It's a lot of kids, a lot of people. I grew up with all my friends at the time around me. We were riding the bicycles because we were relatively poor at the time. I remember my dad sent home raisins, which was something so special. And I got a little bike where I learned how to ride the bicycle. And how my kids in school stole away, how do you call this thing where you're sharpening a pencil sharpener?
Yeah.
Yes, pencil sharpener. It was a little ball. So I was crying going to my teacher at the time. Very different than now. I don't remember a whole lot because I don't know, I know some children remember their childhood very well. I only remember pieces of it. How we only were able to afford 200 grams of meat a month, and I was allowed to eat that instead of my mom. So I appreciate her love a lot.
And I'm just trying to think now as well, what do I remember before 8 years old? I think it's just snippets as well. It's difficult. I don't remember even what food we ate. We just ate food. Like, I don't remember I moved schools, I moved neighborhoods, but yeah, it's hard to think what did you actually do. So as an 8-year-old, you were happy in Saigon, you enjoyed it?
I think so. I had a very good childhood. I didn't know differently.
Saigon and Vietnam obviously so different. I think the 80s there was mass famine, starvation maybe even, but you mentioned that you had 200 grams of meat, but you always had food on the table. You wasn't like, I think Vietnam by the 90s, I may be wrong, but had started to get past that kind of.
Yes, I think once they have the đổi mới or the opening the market to foreign investors, it developed a lot. I was not here anymore at the time to really experience that, but my mom always makes sure that we had food on the table. Yes.
So as an 8-year-old then moving to Germany, totally different culture, totally different weather. I assume you didn't speak the language. What was that like?
It was actually a dream. The first thing I did with my parents were going to a mall where I saw toys for the first time in my life. So many toys, stuffed animal I did not want to leave. I do remember I was crying, sitting on the floor because I did not want to leave that heaven. My parents had to drag me out of the mall. That's one thing I remember as my first experience in Berlin, really.
It's crazy to think that's such a culture change, such a culture shock to come from Vietnam. Saigon must have been pretty rural at that time. And then suddenly you're in a mall.
Yes. Suddenly I was on the plane. We flew from Saigon to Hanoi and then Hanoi to Moscow. Because my dad's friend lived in Moscow. And then we took the train from Moscow to Berlin. I do remember that vaguely. And I actually remember in Moscow, we received a food stamp to queue and buy grapes. It was very cold.
Well, that was my next question then, was what was the weather like? Because then obviously Saigon is just hot all year round, slightly cooler in December and January, but just hot all year round. What time of year was it you moved to Germany?
It was cold. Let me remember, because in 1990, it was winter when I arrived there. It was freaking cold. I was wearing a little áo dài for children, and you know
No.
how thin they are.
You didn't show up in Germany in an Aoyai in winter.
I did,
Oh my God.
with a little windbreaker. Not recommending it to anyone for the first time. But I think in 1992, when I moved officially to Berlin, it was summer, so I was lucky.
Oh, not too bad.
Yes.
So what were your first impressions then of Germany?
People were very standoffish. I did not like the food. It all felt like they only had bread.
But wait, let me just quickly stop you. The reason I'm laughing is because Vietnam, every meal has rice, right? And then our friend Kim went to the UK recently with her husband Lewis, and when she came back, she's like, all they do is eat bread. It's just bread with everything. That was like 6 months ago, and I think it is. They're both carbs. They're both just white carbs. But Vietnam, to be honest, I love rice. I could eat rice every single day. It is delicious. But that's just so funny. Like, it's just bread. They have bread.
And at the time in the 90s, Berlin was relatively poor. It was just right after the fall of the wall, so they were still developing and recovering.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either, actually. It's not like you moved to modern Germany where it's like thriving and things like this. It's right after the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah. My dad was actually at the scene when the fall happened. He was with his friend at the time and saw how people knocked down the wall. So he ran down and knocked the wall with them. We still have an original little piece from the Berlin Wall back home. My parents still have it.
Wow, that's really crazy. I actually remember being in New York and saw there was a place, Fifth Avenue or somewhere like that. They had a piece of the Berlin Wall that was crazy with the graffiti and things like that. And, I think I have a picture of it somewhere. But then to have a piece of the Berlin Wall is crazy. I also forgot as well that there is that communist tie, right? Because it would have been East Germany at the time. And you went through Moscow, which is also in Vietnam. Because it's something I've learned through this podcast. There's a lot of Vietnamese. Do you say diaspora or diaspora? Diaspora, right? a lot of Vietnamese diaspora in Hungary, in a lot of the Eastern European countries because of these communist ties. And is that what led then to your dad getting his scholarship? There was that scholarship you said he had, yeah.
Yes. I think at the time, a lot of people were able to choose, when they are allowed to choose to go abroad, a number of them chose to go to maybe Czech Republic or Russia. My dad, because he was studying social science and philosophy, and some of us do know that there are many great philosophers from Germany. He decided to go there to pursue his PhD.
And he was in East Germany.
He studied in, oh, Dad, don't kill me for saying something wrong. I believe he was in Leipzig first, and Jena, and then he later on moved to Berlin for his PhD.
So was it awkward, or did it cause any difficulties coming from a communist country, being placed in a communist country, then suddenly it's not communist anymore?
For me personally, I don't think that I know that. I was too young to really feel the difference. I'm sure my dad knows the difference. I wish he would write a biography because I would love to hear his story too. But for me, it was just a life where you only had a bicycle and the entire neighborhood had one color TV, to a place where everyone shut their door and everyone seems to have, a much better life. So that's the only really the difference that I could see. And the bread versus the rice.
Well, that's an interesting thing you just said there. Everyone shuts the door because in Vietnam, even now to this day, everyone's door is open. Apart from in these big buildings, in these apartment buildings, I think in some buildings they used to be open. It's something, again, I've seen on expat groups complaining that they're foreigners living in high rises, and then they're like, why do all my neighbors have their doors open? Which I can understand as well. But now I feel like we've become very westernized in these types of buildings. I don't know my neighbors at all. I've never met them. Everyone has their doors closed. But you go out into the Vietnamese neighborhood, a lot of them have fences now or walls up, but you can see over. Everyone has their doors open. And I've heard from photographers who go down to photo tours, everyone has their doors open. You get welcomed in for a cup of tea and you'll be able to take pictures, things like this. So was that really noticeable for you then, to go from this community, District 10, people have their doors open? I imagine maybe you just went from house to house. I mean, maybe I'm making that up. I don't know. You tell me. But it's a much more of a commune. Then suddenly you're in Germany and everyone's doors closed.
Yeah, definitely. You can still feel it now. I think that's one thing that brings a lot of us back to Vietnam, or we feel very welcome here, even if you have never been, living in this country before, is that sense of community. Everyone kind of helps everyone. It has the positive and the negative side, but you feel a lot more welcome.
Have you heard about Vietnamese CCTV?
Oh, is that like the neighbor or yes?
There's every auntie and granny in the neighborhood, every chi is just looking over the fence. I've seen like a meme or something like the Vietnamese CCTV. So maybe that's the downside of it you're mentioning.
Definitely. We can talk about that in a little more. But in Germany, there is also the German CCTV, which is the elderly lady who lives on the ground floor and who knows who is going in, who is going out, why you are coming home late. And then she would talk to your parents in case you would come home with a friend. It happens to be a different gendered friend. Yeah, they do have that too.
So it's the same around the world as well. And every culture is so different. I learned recently that in Russia, they don't smile, apparently. Like, it's just not, like, it's a sign of weakness, maybe, to smile at somebody. I remember speaking to a German friend years ago, and he was saying it's so interesting in the UK. He's like, when you go through to buy your groceries, and I've worked in a supermarket, my mum works in a supermarket, he's like, you're all so friendly. And I was like, what do you mean? Because to me, it's just normal. And he's like, when I buy my groceries, it's like, hey, how's your day? What are you up to? Like, it's always a chat and a smile. And I was like, well, what's it like in Germany? And he's like, they just put your groceries through. There's no small talk. And I guess that's that German efficiency or whatever. And so I just always find that there's cultures are so different, even in small ways. We all buy groceries. But in the UK, I mean, I just hadn't ever thought about it because we are just very friendly. Like, that's just normal. You get your groceries. It would be rude not to talk to the person who's putting through your groceries. And in Germany, he's like, no, we don't do that at all.
Some places may if they have seen you as a regular,
Right.
but in most places, no. Although, have you heard of that Audi? It's not a syndrome, but a lot of people make fun of Audi in Germany.
Right. No, I haven't heard this go on.
So,
Aldi's like the cheap supermarket.
yes,
Yep.
correct. They have a very short lane right after the cashier. So usually when they scan through your product, you have some space to put your bag up and pack your groceries. In Audi, there is none. It's just flying off that lane. So people are like, oh, you really arrived in Berlin or in Germany if you can pack your groceries as fast as the cashier, and they always beat you. They are so fast. I cannot even take my money out of my purse as quickly as the next person is already wanting to pay.
That's one I hadn't heard of that one before, right? So then growing up in Germany as a young Vietnamese girl, what was that like?
It was very strange. I did not speak the language. I went straight into third grade, and I remember I was just like a parrot. I repeated whatever my friend was saying in class. I copied from them. And then you blink an eye and then suddenly you speak the language and you forgot about your actual, mother tongue. That's just how I think my experience is growing up there. Berlin at the time was very different too. And I think some people may know if they were born, around my age maybe. That is the complexity of Vietnamese communities in Berlin at the time. You try and do a lot of things to survive, and it's not always easy there. I did not grow up in a Vietnamese community at all. I grew up in Prenzlauer Berg, Berlin, basically white. I did not have Vietnamese friends, and I really don't have a lot of Vietnamese friends even now. And yeah, sometimes when we go to the OVs, I feel like, oh, do I belong? Because I feel some people, even if they were not born here, had a better association or connection with the country than I did or I do. And it feels a little weird at times. I know that I did not know I was Vietnamese or Asian until I looked into the mirror, because I only saw my friends and I see my reflection in them. And I only realized, certain maybe differences or let's say racism later on in my life when I really had the grasp of like, oh, there are different cultures and how they perceive you. Yeah.
Well, we've talked a lot. I mean, this is the 14th season of this podcast, and one of the things I love is learning and talking to people like yourself. So I feel like I say this a lot. I'm very aware that I'm a white guy. I'm very aware of my background. So I'm brought up in a white society. We had some Indians, we had some Pakistanis in our school, but they were second generation. So they were like they were different, obviously, right? Different skin color, but predominantly white, Christian-ish society, very homogenous, right? And then I moved to America, pretty similar. Then I moved to Australia, even more similar. Then I moved to New Zealand, even more similar, right? So all these white cultures. So I'm very aware of that. Then being here in Vietnam, but doing this podcast and talking to people like yourself over the years, it's really opened my eyes. And my wife is Mexican American, and she's kind of like, how did you not know this? Like almost like, But it's interesting to learn about third culture kids is a phrase I'd never really heard of up until a few years ago. And to learn about people like yourself who just have a completely different outlook on the world. And I can't even begin to imagine what that's like. I mean, I can begin to imagine through conversations with people like yourself, but it must be just so difficult growing up. And then eventually, what age do you think you realize, like, oh, for want of a better word, I'm different?
I think that I really realized that when I moved to the US
At what age?
in 2021. So not long ago. Oh, how old am I there? Oh my gosh. In my 30s. Because For some reason, I felt very arrived. Like I felt like I belong to them in
To
the
who?
US
The US.
because it's a migration country.
Mm.
If you don't speak, no one would know if you are a tourist or if you are a foreigner or you were first, second generation American.
Mm.
So that's when I think I knew it before, but it really clicked then to like going back to Berlin for a visit, like, oh, people do look at me differently. Oh, there is a very minor way of how they treat you. And I thought it was just ignorant, but it is a little more than just ignorant.
You feel like racist?
Yeah, a little.
In Berlin?
In Berlin,
Yeah.
yeah. And
How
it
did that manifest?
I miss Berlin a lot. I think I would always move back to Berlin in a heartbeat. But if I would have that belonging feeling from the US in Berlin, it would be perfect. I don't quite have that. I would move to Berlin because of habit, because nostalgic feelings, and because my friends, my whole society, my circle is there, not because I feel like I belong to them.
Wow. So you feel like you belong more in America than you did in Berlin?
I think I would belong more there than in Berlin. For some reason, even when I was living in London, I felt like I was a lot more myself.
Wow. Well, I was going to ask, so do you feel German or do you feel Vietnamese? Or do you feel a bit of both? Or does it change based on what language you're speaking?
I feel, I would say, without deeply thinking about it, I would say I feel more German because I probably feel more confident speaking German and I do act more German.
What does that mean?
My mom would say, when I moved to Vietnam or when I told her I will move back, she's like, you need to let go. You cannot bring the German attitude back to Vietnam. Not everything is always by the book. Not everything is a straight line. Let it go. Chill.
That's great advice, I think.
Yes. And I was like, oh, I don't think so. And I think in the first month, I was like, uh-oh, I get it. I see it. Especially talking to other overseas Vietnamese, like, oh, yeah, we really can't take that attitude back here. It's a very different life. But, I'm like a proper, it needs to be this way. We don't conform to gender roles. I'm also, being very progressive. It's a little more challenging too. Not that Vietnam is not or Saigon is not progressive. I think they are, just a little different. But yeah, it just.
Can you remember the first example of you being here and thinking, oh, this is different?
Oh, when I was renovating our apartment. And some of the girls I have met, I've told them about that too. Here's like, especially when you work with men that, let's say carpenters, and I don't know how much you have renovated your own home.
Never. So zero experience of this.
In Berlin, when you rent an apartment, it's empty. If you're lucky, there's a stove and there's a sink, nothing more. So you basically just go and carry furniture home. You build your own thing out of, I don't know, wood pieces. You go to IKEA. You do all things yourself. You paint the wall. Here you pay people to do that. But it does mean that even though I'm not the master of the craft, I do kind of know what I want. And I kind of know what needs to be done on maybe a little more than the basic level. And they would not listen. And you're like, no, you cannot do that.
Because you're a female?
Yes. So I had to send my dad to talk to them.
To tell them the same thing that you were saying.
Right. I was like, Dad, you're older. You are a man. You have lived here. You know how to talk to them. Please help me. And he would just talk to them and they would immediately change their attitude.
And how frustrating was that?
Very frustrating. I think I talked to my husband for 3 days about it because I could not digest it in my brain. Like, I'm not even asking for something that is ridiculous. I even showed them a video and pictures. Like, how can they tell me that doesn't exist?
And so it's just the hierarchical, patriarchal strategy. I was going to say not strategy, but there's a system here that they just shut off to a woman speaking, whereas you think in Germany they would listen to you.
I think I would be a lot more confident in Germany to talk to them on the same level and say, no, do this. Whereas I feel the language here, if you translate it from German to Vietnamese, it can sound very harsh and rude. And I'm still translating a lot from German to Vietnamese. And I think maybe that is also a barrier between the way we communicate. And I don't want to be rude to them, but maybe by avoiding being rude, I'm going around the bush too much or being too soft.
How different are the languages
German,
in Vietnamese?
oh, very different.
In their style, like I could imagine German is German efficiency of that just direct, and Vietnamese, because I don't speak Vietnamese, but I've seen over the years. I remember the example was in the gym I was working out at the time. There was a sign on the bench, basically just said, "Don't use it, it's broken." Very simple, 3 or 4 words. Then the Vietnamese translation underneath was 3 sentences and about 25 words, and I was like, how is, and I spoke to a Vietnamese friend, she's like, yeah, because we have to, the way it's explained has to be so different. And so I imagine between German and Vietnamese, and you've just said it there, like you're going around the houses, but is it the Vietnamese language designed like that because you as a female have to go around the houses to be able to make your point?
I'm not sure. I think I'm not fluent or familiar enough in, the origin of the language to really answer that question.
Yeah.
I might need to ask my dad. But I know just based on how you address, it's not just you and I, it's how old are you. There are so many little things that you need to know. Is the person older than my dad? I call them differently. Are they maybe just older than me? And then there's also, can I call them aunt, like go, or should I call them just like older sister Ji, because you also don't want them to feel bad about their age. And you
It's so
can't guess
complicated, right?
their age. Is so complicated. And I think that is reflected in the language. Whereas in German, it's just, I want you to do that. Thank you.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did a good job. Great. Oh, I bought this beautiful new dress. Cool. There's not a lot of, we have emotions,
Yeah.
but a little different,
The one that got me with the pronouns was my Vietnamese friend was explaining to me. It's like if my dad's brother is older than my cousin, like I call my cousin a different pronoun or something like that. Like it can get really complicated. It's whereas I would just call my cousin if my cousin's dad is older than my dad. If my cousin's dad is older than my dad, then my cousin is pronoun is my uncle. I'm probably saying that wrong, but it was something like that.
Oh,
It's so deep.
I have no idea. I would not even know. I think I just know the basic of go and do, back, and it's also depending if they are from your mother's side or your dad's side. They have different
Yeah,
name
right.
for that too. And then the north speaks has a different word than the south or the central part. I'm not very
Complicated.
good with that.
So you speak at least 3 languages. So you speak German, Vietnamese, and English, all very well. What do you speak anymore?
I did learn French and Brazilian Portuguese. I emphasize on Brazilian Portuguese because I don't understand Portuguese from Portugal very well. Pronunciation is a little different.
Right.
And I did some Korean in school, but I would not say that the later 3 languages is worth, putting on my resume.
So what do you consider your first language?
I would say German. Although I have gotten much, much better with my Vietnamese now after a month. I, however, think a lot of times in English.
I've asked this question before because this fascinates me. Is what language do you think in? Because I remember the first time I met somebody and I can't remember where they were from, but I think they said, "Oh, I think in English now." And I was like, I never thought about that because I just think in English because I only speak English. And I was like, that's crazy because at one point you would start to think in a different language.
Yeah. I mentioned I did my I'm a plant scientist. I did my PhD in Germany, but it was an international institution. So our main language was English. And my PhD was in English. All the scientific publications are in English. I'm married to a US citizen. So it's somehow easier for me to express certain things in English. It's easier for me to express
I was going to
frustration.
ask, when you get angry, what language do you speak in?
German.
Right. That's when your husband knows he's fucked up when you speak in German.
Ooh, that may require a different episode.
So your mum and dad spoke Vietnamese at home. Now, they left in 1992, you said? 90-ish?
To Germany.
Yeah, to Germany.
My dad in 88 and
Yeah.
my mom in 92 with me.
So you learned Vietnamese from your parents. When you came back, you've been back here for a month. Is the Vietnamese that you learned out of date? Because I've heard stories before, not from the 80s, but from American families that left 1975, then their kids learned Vietnamese from them, then came back to Vietnam, and they used, it was like the name for airport is now Sambai, but it used to be, forget now, it used to be something else. So they would come here and then use the old, because language develops, right? Like English was different in 1975 than it is now. So they would come back to Vietnam confident in their Vietnamese, speak it, and then people are like, what? We don't use that word anymore. Did you come across that, or by that point had the language is kind of similar to what it is now?
Maybe I should mention something. I did spend 3 years in my later teenage years in Vietnam.
Ah, okay.
My dad felt like I completely lost my roots and decided to drag me back to Saigon.
Good on him though, probably, right?
So I learned how to really speak and
okay.
write the
Right,
language.
right. So you got it back.
I got it back. But even then, now I think the language has changed too. And I think it's more the younger generation that use those, what is the in word of the year? I have no idea. And I think even in English or German, I don't know what the in word of the year is. I think there are. I haven't come across that as much because being here for a month, I mainly spoke to my parents and the Overseas Vietnamese in English. So I haven't really come across, new words. There are words I don't know. And that could just be the lack of knowledge rather than a change in the vocabulary.
So what made you come back to Vietnam then?
This time, my parents are getting older. I remember in Germany when I got to know some Vietnamese people, younger Vietnamese that were living with their parents or close to their parents, they were able to say, I'm going to shop in my mom's fridge. And I always envy that. I was like, that's so cool. They just cook. You go over there, you take your food home. So good. I've never had that, growing up. So I felt like, oh, they're getting older. I've lived in the US for 3 years. I'm gonna get sick of it. I want a change in atmosphere. Vietnam is opening up to foreigners a lot in maybe the last decade. And I was able to convince my husband to let's just try it out. If not now, then when? We are still young. We have a job that we can, do from anywhere. We never know what will happen in the future, so let's try it out. And now I can confidently say I can shop in my mom's fridge.
I love it. That's amazing. So you've been back a month. What do you think then? What's your opinion?
I think it was a good call.
Yeah.
It's great. It's vibrant. The city is vibrant.
Such a great word to describe it, yeah.
It has changed so much from obviously decades ago when I was living here. And what I think I enjoyed the most is everyone is so welcoming. Vietnamese people are curious why you come back, but not with a judgmental way. At least I have not experienced that.
Well, you don't understand what they're saying properly.
Maybe they will say something and I don't know. And then you met, all these overseas Vietnamese or foreigners that have chosen Vietnam as their new home, and it is something that connects us. And I just love it.
You mentioned it's changed a lot. My question is, and then let me explain my question, is that a good thing? Because I don't think it's representative of many people, but I've seen it before on expat groups. people love to romanticize Vietnam. And I've seen people, when people talk about the changes or the positives, you sometimes see people be like, oh, well, I used to live there and I loved it when it was 5,000 dong a bowl of pho, or now there's McDonald's there or there's Starbucks. Like, people romanticize this past of they want it to be sleepier. They want it to be people on bikes and pho on every street corner, which still exists, to be perfectly honest. One of the things, as I've lived here for longer, I kind of take a little bit of umbrage with that, because when people romanticize the past and they want to live where it was 5,000 dong a bowl of pho, like, you realize the people were poor then, right? Like, your romanticized past of people on bicycles and Vietnam was this idyllic paradise. The people were poor and didn't have as much as they have now. You ask them now, do they want that? Like, probably not. Do they want Starbucks? Yes. I was in Starbucks yesterday. It was packed and packed full of young, vibrant Vietnamese people with a lot of money because it's not cheap. So I think it has changed massively. The world has changed. There's probably lots of things that we all wish it was like that in the past. But if you experienced that kind of sentiment that people like long for the past, do people like the changes? And what do you think of those changes that you've noticed?
I'm sure. I do think that Vietnamese people are happy in some form about a change. As you said, if the bowl of pho was 5,000, it means they don't have a lot of mean. And if the bowl of pho now is sometimes 100,000 if you are in Thao Dien, then the question is not, is it worth that money? But it means that those people probably earn better, or people who can afford to eat there have a better income. So the economy is growing. And I think that definitely in society, you see also a big part of people getting richer and richer, but then also people who are poor are still poor or getting poorer. So that's a different topic. But I do welcome the change. I don't appreciate, however, if a foreigner or an expat is moving to Vietnam to exploit the country, and I don't think we should take that mentality anywhere. I don't always love when someone says, oh, this is so cheap, even if it costs 250,000 dong a bowl of, I don't know, quinoa bowl, because you have the US dollar to bring. For me, it's more like, wouldn't it be nice if also other people can afford that? And wouldn't it be nice if you also support the mom and pops, And I think that's when I feel a little ashamed to say I'm an expat. In the end, I'm also just immigrating to this country, which is, part of my heritage. And I think we shouldn't think we are better than anyone else. And if we start working with a Vietnamese salary, we will think probably very differently about, what we are spending it on. I might just go to Vin Mall and get myself a Vietnamese coffee for 30-something thousand instead of 79,000 in a coffee shop. Yeah.
It gets really complicated because, like I mentioned, there's these romanticized notions that expats have that people have visited here. The worst one that happened to me, I've brought this up before on the podcast, that I posted a video about my favorite craft beer bars in Saigon. It was expensive, right? They're 100,000 a beer, probably around that, right? And someone commented, when I come to Vietnam, I try and spend more money there than I do in my own country. I go to all the local mom and pop places and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, who do you think owns and works in these places? And actually, you go there, it's all Vietnamese people that are spending that money. Like I mentioned, I was in Starbucks. It's Vietnamese people that are spending that money. So Saigonese people, Vietnamese people have money to spend as well. I guess the kind of got off track there. What I was going to ask you though was, you said you don't like it when people come here and exploit the local people. Now, I think that's a really loaded and complicated sentence, because what does that exploit mean? Because if someone is coming here with foreign direct investment and they're spending 100 million US dollars to build a factory, and all those people are still making $3 an hour, are they exploiting them? Or are they, like this globalization, right? They're taking advantage of a cheaper labor force. It's just a fact. It's cheaper here, right? So these big factories, Nike, Samsung, Apple, all of them, and a million others that we've never heard of, come here, open up a factory. So you're like, okay, yeah, they're taking advantage of the local population, but at the same time, they're injecting $100 million into the local population. And that person, us in the West, we think $3 an hour sounds ridiculous. But $3 an hour is $3 an hour more than what they were making before, or $2 an hour more than what they were making before. So I think it's really complicated. So what does exploiting the local population mean?
I agree with you, Neil, absolutely. And I think I'm also part of the issue because I, in the end, I am coming here with a foreign money.
Yeah.
But I think, so let's say the example you mentioned about the factory. Yes, $3 the hour is nothing for us, but it creates job, and that gives them a different life, a chance, maybe a skill that they learn, and a different life than, let's say, selling, I don't know, bread on the street.
Rice on the street.
Rice on, thank you. Banh mi, although
Banh mi
banh
though,
mi,
yeah, true, yeah, that's bread.
banh mi has although got more expensive. I think exploit is, to me at least, is more of, it's not about how much you pay them as much as like what else are you giving to them. So let's say you build homes for them, you provide them with social benefits, you provide them with an insurance because they work in the factories, they are accident prone, you are supporting their children in having education. That would not be an exploitation to me because you are helping those people to get a better life. Exploitation would maybe be if you get paid as, the manager $1,000 a month, but you only pay your people $3 a month. Like that's such a big difference. And the shirt that they may be creating will be sold in the United States for $200.
We sold in Vietnam. I mean, that's one of the things, you go to the Adidas store or wherever, it's made in Vietnam, but it's sold at the same price as the US.
I think it's more all the middlemen and middle agencies that is in between that is getting their fair share that is questionable if they really deserve that share. And I think if there's too many steps in between, it is unneeded because everyone would like to fill their bags or pocket. To me, that's more of an exploitation than if you were to really want to contribute into the society and the economy by investing foreign money and create a better life.
I do almost feel that just explains the whole world.
Yes.
Unfortunately, like really sadly, unfortunately, like wherever country you're in, the people are not getting paid enough. You hear about it in the Amazon factories, like in the US, the low pay and things like that. I mean, and you mentioned as well about the poor getting poorer and the rich getting richer. This is the problem as well worldwide. There is a massive increase in wealth, which is great if you have it, but then the poor are getting poorer as well. Yeah, so it's just a really complicated situation, which we're not going to solve today or even get to the bottom of. So I do want to ask you about your husband, because we've just done a podcast with Hoa Chan, and I'm trying to say lime. How was my pronunciation? I'm trying to say Hoa Lime. Chan.
Hoa Lam.
Like lime, Lime.
Oh,
How's my pronunciation?
Lime.
Chan?
Jung.
Her partner is American, so we talked a little bit about that. My partner's American as well. Your partner's American as well. So we've got to bring it up. What's it like being married to an American?
So different.
So different. Yeah, so what's kind of some of the differences, some of the culture shocks that you've experienced?
Let's put it this way. I think I married him as a German, not so much as a Vietnamese.
Interesting.
He is from Chicago, born, raised, now left, but never really lived for a long time in a different place. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Midwestern politeness.
Not massively familiar. I've lived on the East Coast. My wife's from Texas, so not really.
People would say that people from the East Coast in the United States are more direct, Bostoners or New Yorkers. Maybe I can talk to them better because they're more like efficient, fast, running. Midwesterns are more talking in a very soft way. His family especially, for some reason, which I adore and love, but also has a bit of like, please get to the point. For me, is I appreciate you a lot. I appreciate that. The word appreciation, I have never used the word appreciation so many times in my 40 something years.
I've never heard this before.
So I think he is a wonderful person, but we had to learn communication a lot. And I tend in an argument to use as few words as possible because I thought you don't get me if I say a 10-word long sentence, so let's just bring it down to 5. For him, that's rude. So I do have to work on the communication a lot when we got to know each other.
Yeah. How did you meet?
He was traveling. He had a 1-year work and travel. His boss at the time was generous enough to let him do that. He was in Berlin, and with a lot of modern couples, I think we met online. I just wanted to have a friend to talk in English to, and he just wanted to get to know people in Berlin. I think we moved in together after 3 weeks.
Yeah, beautiful. My wife and I, we got engaged after about a month. We met each other. We moved in together pretty quickly. We've been together 14 years now. It just happens like that, right?
We didn't date at the time, but I felt bad for him because he paid for his Airbnb room, it was a shared room, as much as someone else's monthly rent in Berlin. And I just thought to myself, well, he seems like a nice person. If I were to travel and wanting to save money, I would love it if someone would help me.
Oh, so he moved in with you after 3 weeks, but you just platonically?
Yeah, we just met and just had a good time. We never thought we would ever see each other again. But things just happen in life, and I love traveling. And I just thought to myself, oh, the man is traveling. He has an Airbnb. If I'm visiting him, I don't have to pay for my accommodation, and I have someone to hang out with. So he was in Croatia, he was in Barcelona, in Japan. So I visited him in those places. And his last destination was Vietnam, and that's when we decided, it's been going on for almost a year. We should date.
So you hadn't dated that whole time?
We were,
Hooking up.
yes, friends with benefits.
Okay, right. So, okay, there was something there.
Oh, yeah, we were. I was exclusive. I can't speak for the man. I don't want to know. But yes, we felt strongly
Beautiful.
towards each other, and I thought, it will be transatlantic relationship, but we'll make it work, and we'll make it work.
I can see your face lighting up, which is awesome. Well, I just talked to Wah about the culture shock as Vietnamese, and she's from Hanoi. You're Vietnamese German, but what was your big culture shock then going to America for the first time?
The friendliness. I think we talked about that earlier.
Right.
Germans.
They're so friendly in America. I love it. They're outstandingly friendly, and I think Americans overseas don't have the best reputation for various reasons, mostly their government's actions, and we also talked about recently just the level of their volume. They're just so loud. But I mean, so I lived on the East Coast. You hear about the Southern hospitality, but even on the East Coast, they're just the friendliest, nicest people. And I fell in love with America when I went there. And I think that's why people do love America. The people are amazing. They're so friendly. They're so nice. I always remember when I went there, you go to somebody's house, they open their fridge. It's like, what do you want? What can we feed you? I'll pick you up at the airport. It just, and then I'll hear your opinion on this. Sorry, I'm jumping in on my question, but we were in America recently. My wife's from Texas. Her family are just typical Americans. So nice, so lovely. Same thing, fridge. What do you want to eat? Coffee in the morning, go make yourself some coffee. They're so welcoming. Their house is your house. They'll pick you up, they'll drive you, they'll give you their car. We went back to Scotland. My family and friends are not like that. It's so stark. Even in my mum's house, and thank God my mum doesn't listen to this. This is a really stark example. My mum had fucking turkey slices in the fridge. And we don't get turkey here much. It's quite rare. I mean, you can find it, but it's rare and it's expensive. She had just turkey meat in the fridge from the supermarket because it's so... I was like, oh, it was our first day back. I was like, amazing turkey. I'm going to eat. You can't eat that. I was like, what do you mean, why? She's like, I'm keeping that for a sandwich later. I was like, fuck do you mean? You can buy this in the supermarket that you work at? So it's just small things like that. And again, my mum doesn't listen to this. We did not feel welcome in my own home when we went back, and it's just not the same. When we were in America, you could not feel more welcome in everyone's house. So sorry, I've just jumped in on your question there. My question was, what was the culture shock? You said the friendliness.
Yes, the friendliness. I would say my German family, I grew up there with a foster family, and my friends' family were all very welcoming. So I felt like home at their place in Germany. It's hard for me because personal experiences, right? In the US, the friendliness is great, but it's tiring. I,
Maybe my personality, I don't find it tiring. I love it.
oh
Oh.
my goodness. I remember I went into a store and immediately, hi, welcome, how are you? And I felt obligated to answer them. And I don't think they really needed the answer. And I remember I went through a mall and the doorman was just, hi, how are you? And I was already a couple of meters gone because I was just like, I need to buy something. I'll go. And I'm like, oh no, you've been rude. You didn't answer him. So I turn around and it's like, I'm well, so how are you? And I think he was completely confused by my action. So when you go, or at least when I went to different stores, in every store I had to, hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Good, thank you. It's like, oh my God, I'm tired. I just want to get my coffee, just take my order, let me go. So it was tiring. Now I do it and it's just subconscious and I don't even answer if they say anything and I think that's fine. And then I miss that when I'm in Germany because I'm, oh, you're rude. You are so rude. You don't smile, you don't say hi, you don't say bye. Yeah.
I think in Scotland, we are pretty friendly as well, like I said, going through the supermarket checkout. So I think it's similar. And in America, I think it's just next level. But I do agree with what you're saying about it being tiring because I shared this story on the podcast just recently and my wife listened to it and she's like, you're just telling all the same stories because I've told this story a million times. I used to do stand-up comedy and so this actually was a bit I would do, but it was just real life. So I lived in Rhode Island in the Northeast and I was there for 5 years on and off, last couple of years full time. So I'd been there for a long time and I'd go to Dunkin' Donuts, which is my favorite place in the world, and get a coffee and a donut. And in the last couple of years, nearly every time the girl would be like, oh my God, where are you from? Oh, I love your accent. Oh, what are you doing here? What are you... And I got tired of it, yeah. And I feel so cynical now. I feel like a dick. But at the time, yeah, you get tired of it because I would be like, I live down the road on a summer camp. I've been here for 5 years. Can I get my coffee and a donut? You know what I mean? And so the joke I would make was that she was kind of hitting on me or whatever. And she probably wasn't. But it was just the same every time. Like, oh my God, where are you from? I love your accent. I'd be like, yeah, they are amazing people. It's awesome. Anne, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I've absolutely loved chatting to you. I'm so excited you're back in Vietnam. Are you here for the long term?
I hope so.
Hope so.
We will see.
Yeah, it's a hard question. People ask me as well, how long are you going to live here for? I'm like, I don't know. But thank you for listening or watching. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Remember, please share it with someone else who also loves Vietnam, whether they live here or they're thinking of visiting. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. Go to the website, vietnampodcast.com. We have over 300 episodes now that you can delve into in the back catalogue and find out so much more about this amazing country. And thank you so much for coming on a Vietnam podcast.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Neil.
You're welcome. Cheers.